Hi guys, my name is Kelsey and this is my sample lesson for Learnt. And today we are going to be talking about essay structure because if you don't know how to structure your essay, it's impossible to lay out a good argument that's easy for your reader to follow and persuade them that your viewpoint is valid. So all essays start out with an introduction. So this is just going to be your general background. So if you're writing about a novel, like for example, if you were writing about Tolstoy's War and Peace, well, Tolstoy's War and Peace is a fictionalized depiction of the war side of the Napoleonic Wars and also the societal, the peace side. So you basically have parts of the novel talking about, soldiers, what they're doing, what they're experiencing, and then you have parts where you have just members of societies who live in a place where there happens to be a war going on and what, the effects of war are on that. That would be like general background, right? So after you give your general background, you give a thesis statement. For example, you could say you think that Tolstoy's War and Peace is anti-war. That's my belief, right? And then what your thesis statement says is basically, this is what I believe, this is the evidence support me, and this is why it matters. So I could say, for example, Tolstoy's anti-war, War and Peace is anti-war because it shows the horrors of an everyday soldier in war with the injury, permanent injuries, and all the killing, of your comrades around you. Second reason that supports that evidence is that it shows the negative repercussions of war on a society, a peaceful society, and non-combatants. And the third reason could be that war has a lot of negative cost and it doesn't really accomplish anything. And why that matters is because if you don't understand Tolstoy's intentions in writing this novel, it's hard to really get to the matter of it and really truly understand it. So that would be my thesis statement. Tolstoy's anti-war, the three reasons I gave, why it matters, because you're not really going to understand Tolstoy's viewpoint on war, and especially given that he became a very public pacifist later on in his life, you're not going to understand why if you don't understand this. So let's review. We have our intro, general background on the novel, Napoleonic Wars, blah, blah, blah. We have our thesis. This is what I believe. Tolstoy's anti-war, War and Peace is anti-war. Why? The three reasons I gave you. Why that matters? Well, given that Tolstoy was a pacifist later in life, we can basically assume that he wrote War and Peace to be an anti-war novel because he wanted to show people the negative parts of war and he wanted them to elect not to wage any more wars for statecraft or empire building or for any reason like that. So that's the end of our introduction. We went over the introduction and the thesis. What do we go to now? So we have 3 body paragraphs, and basically these are the 3 parts of the thesis statement I gave. So body paragraph 1, Tolstoy's anti-war. Why? First major piece of evidence, the way he depicts the horrors of being a soldier in a war, the injuries, the maimings, the psychological consequences. Body paragraph number 2, negative repercussions of war on a society, of violence on a peaceful society, all the negative trauma that comes from that, and the physical consequences, your house is getting destroyed, your business is getting destroyed, people are getting injured, people are getting, just traumatized by random acts of violence just because they happen to be living in a war zone. So that's body paragraph number 2. Body paragraph number 3 is the third part of our argument, which is basically Tolstoy is anti-war, War and Peace is anti-war, because he shows the futility of war, how it doesn't accomplish anything, how it's not a great tool for statecraft or empire building, how all it does is lead to negative repercussions for your state. And it's just inherently negative. And states shouldn't wage war. They shouldn't be eager to do so, and they shouldn't think that waging war is going to solve any type of real problem. So that's body paragraph number 3. So, thesis, like we said, War and Peace, anti-war. 3 reasons I gave, each have their own body paragraph. In each body paragraph, we're being very careful at the beginning to connect each body paragraph back to the thesis. So the first statement, the first sentence of each of these body paragraphs says, Tolstoy is anti-war, War and Peace is anti-war because XYZ. So that way your reader can know, hey, this body paragraph is about, piece number 1 of the evidence for this person's thesis. And then body paragraph number 2, hey, this is from the thesis statement. This is body paragraph is going to be about reason number 2 from the thesis statement. And then the same thing with body paragraph number 3. So then we go to our conclusion, right? And the conclusion is basically where you are restating your thesis saying, hey, this is what I told you guys at the beginning of the paragraph. War and Peace is anti-war, Tolstoy's anti-war. The reasons I gave you, you're restating your argument in brief. You're not going to repeat all the body paragraphs, but you're just going to restate it. So I told you Tolstoy was anti-war, and body paragraph number 1, I showed you this because I showed you how he depicts the trauma of war, the negative consequences of war on an everyday soldier, the injuries, the maimings around them, the people being killed around them, how horrible it is for a real everyday soldier. In body paragraph number 2, I showed you the negative repercussions war has on a civilian society, on people who aren't soldiers, and all the trauma that causes them, especially when they just happen to be living in a war zone. They're losing their house, their business, people are being killed just because they happen to be living in a war zone through all fault of their own. And reason number 3, body paragraph number 3, I told you that Tolstoy's anti-war, and you can see this because of the way he shows war is futile, how war doesn't accomplish anything, how war it's not a good tool for statecraft, it's not a good tool for empire building, it doesn't do anything but cause negative repercussions and cost a lot of pain and suffering and death. And it's futile, it's pointless, and that nobody should ever wage war as a state. That shouldn't be something we think is necessary. So that was body paragraph number 3. And in conclusion, that's my thesis, that's my evidence, and this is really important because Tolstoy became a huge internationally renowned pacifist in the second half of his life, and it didn't come from nowhere. So if you read War and Peace and you're unaware that he was a pacifist, that underlies his whole philosophy regarding war, and it didn't just come out of nowhere. He had been writing about war in negative terms, trying to enlighten people as to the true negative nature of war and its chaos and the trauma. His whole writing career, just nobody paid attention to that aspect of it until he very publicly started talking about it about 15 years after he wrote War and Peace. So if you're trying to tell me you understand War and Peace, but you don't understand that it's fundamentally an anti-war novel, well, you can't really get it, because Tolstoy's pacifism didn't exist in a vacuum. It totally existed in a world where he was trying to get people to see that war is not rah-rah nationalism, war is not rah-rah patriotism, this great thing. It's horrible. And that's my conclusion. So by this point, we've gone over all the parts. So our introduction, our thesis, our 3 body paragraphs, which are basically the 3 main pieces of evidence that we're outlining that support our thesis, and our conclusion, which basically restates our thesis, that does a little mini summary. Hey, this is what I told you in body paragraph number 1, reason number 1 supporting my thesis. This is what I told you in body paragraph number 2, reason number 2 supporting my thesis. And this is what I told you in body paragraph number 3, reason number 3 supporting my thesis. And then we ultimately conclude by linking it to the greater message we're trying to say. This thesis is important because I don't think you can really accurately understand War and Peace if you see it as a traditional novel that glorifies war, as most of the novels written about war were at this time. I don't think you can really understand the characters or the themes that he's really getting at if you don't understand that he was a pacifist at heart when he wrote this. And that would be my essay, to try to persuade you to believe me that War and Peace is anti-war. And I've given you all this evidence, all these reasons to believe me, and hopefully, because my argument was outlined and delineated in very clear ways, it's very easy for you to break apart my argument, but also show how it builds, how the thesis builds on what I showed you in the introduction, how each body paragraph builds on the little snippet, the 3 main parts of the thesis I outlined in the introduction. So it's all a systemic, starting with a foundation, then building layer after layer after layer in a very transparent way that allows your reader to follow your argument and understand what you're saying, and then that persuades them that your viewpoint is valid in this matter. So I hope, and like I said, this is something that can help you then break other people's arguments down. This is something you can use to break down readings you're given on standardized tests that, it just seems overwhelming and you're not familiar with this person or what they're writing about. But if you can break down their argument and go, hey, this is body paragraph number 1, this is explaining part 1 of the thesis and the evidence for it. Oh, I can now answer this question, and this is why it's important. So that's why this is important, not only for knowing how to construct your own arguments and write your own essays, but also for trying to give you tools that make you a better reader, tools that make you a better test taker, because this is what they're expecting you to be able to do. So I hope this has helped you understand a little bit more about essay structure and why it's so important and how it works, how you build an essay, and I hope that it helps you out. All right, thanks guys.